Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining us for tonight's edition of HR Mentorship Learning Series. My name is Oluyemi Adeosun. Tonight, we'll be looking at the topic HR for line managers. And our facilitator is Damola Olaleye, who we are extremely happy she's back again, and we would love to keep having her as frequently as our tight schedule can oblige her. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to read her profile very briefly. Damola is a senior people development leader with over 40 years experience across the public, private, and not-for-profit sectors. She brings expertise in leadership development, organizational effectiveness, employee engagement, and strategic HR, and is a trusted advisor to senior leaders, supporting them to translate strategy into impactful people outcomes. She began her career in HR at Standard Chartered Bank, where she held a range of roles and coordinated the diversity and inclusion agenda for the West African cluster. She also served as secretary of the Nigerian Diversity and Inclusion Forum. The forum was recognized by the Standard Chartered Banks Group D&I Awards in 2016 and 2018. Prior to transitioning into HR, she worked in the consumer banking division of the bank. Since relocating to the United Kingdom, she managed a team in the Department for Work and Pension, served as the HRBP at Hachette, and is currently the Pioneer HR Manager at Homeless Oxfordshire. She set up the HR function and operations for the organization. Damola currently serves as a trustee of Tony B. Hall, contributing to governance, strategy, and people oversight, and she's a member of the Charter Institute of Personal Development Thames Valley Committee, which organizes and delivers learning events and insights for CIPD members. She initiated and delivered quarterly coffee and connect sessions for the committee to strengthen HR relationships within the network. She holds a first-class degree in political science and is a recipient of multiple awards, including the Jacques Avent Scholarship for Commitment to Public Service. She writes and owns her French in her spare time and enjoys discussing world affairs, traveling, hosting family and friends. Ladies and gentlemen, let's make welcome Damola Olaleye as she anchors the session, HR for Line Managers. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Adeosun, for having me back. It's indeed lovely to be back here. And good evening, everyone, and thank you for spending the next 1 to 1.5 hours with me on a Wednesday evening. I do not take that for granted. And for those of us who practice HR, happy HR Day to all of us. For those of us that don't know, May 20 is dedicated to recognizing the hard and good work of HR professionals across the world. So if you didn't wish your HR happy HR Day today, please do that tomorrow when you get to work. Now let's get to it. I've tried to leave about 15 minutes towards the end for questions. So I'll go through the presentation quite quickly. And if you can't hear me or you have any questions, feel free to drop in the chat and Mr. Adeosun would let me know. We can take that as the session is going on, if you've got any questions. For those of us who practice HR, we may have experienced situations where we can see how a certain work situation is going to end, and we advise the manager or managers on what to do, but they don't take that advice. And then when it goes pear-shaped, HR is left holding the bag, or they're called in to come and clean up. Or you might have heard that you might have had managers say to you as HR that your HR, you don't understand. That's something I've I see quite a bit, not anymore. On the other hand, as managers, you might feel that, what does HR do? Especially on this international HR day, what does HR do anyway? They don't do anything but push the work, to me as the manager or as the leader to do. All they can do is bring all of these lofty ideas that are not workable, right? So there's that tension between managers, or there's usually that tension between managers and HR, right? But the truth is that managers and HR need to work together and collaboratively, because managers are what one can call the frontline human resources, right? They're the face of the policies, the processes, the procedures the strategy, everything HR develops, or even not just HR, everything a leadership team develops, it is the manager that, that delivers that. They're the face of that, right? So it's very important that as HR we recognize that. And yes, managers have a lot on their plate. They have to do a lot of juggling. So at times to them, having to do, now I'm putting in quotes, the fluffy or soft people stuff looks like it's not worth their time, given everything else that they have to do, right? But today I'm going to tell you as a manager that if you get your people stuff right and you do it very well, you actually get more time to be able to focus on your business priorities and get on with delivering whatever goals and objectives that you have. Because it is the people in your team, that are responsible for delivering that. And if you're not managing them properly, right, there's no smooth sailing. But if you can get that right, there's a lot of, you find work easier to do. It's the people stuff that's not done right that usually takes up a lot of management time and causes the stress that feels like, oh, I'm not doing anything but, the what at times managers will call the HR stuff. Next slide. So for this, I'm going to talk about what at times I call the doing function versus the advice function, or decision maker versus, I'm not an imposter, I just have to advise you. So as a manager, what are you responsible for? As HR, what does HR do? Not very exhaustive, but just a summary, in my view. Usually managers are responsible for day-to-day people management. So you're coming to work, you're not able to come to work, you've got a flat tire, you usually not call your HR. Usually, it's the manager that usually gets called for that, or even for the more serious stuff. Where an employee probably has concerns, they usually typically go to their manager first. Recruiting and onboarding the team members, providing technical oversight and expertise. Usually, this is the area where managers focus on a lot, or where they feel that this is my job, this is what I should be doing, and not, all the other things. Allocating tasks and monitoring the quality of work, measuring performance, developing people, supporting teams' well-being, and fostering the right culture. This is some of the things that a manager has to do. Though not the topic of discussion tonight, we also find that in some organizations, managers have their own deliverables, right? But we won't go into that. What does HR do, or what should HR be doing? HR is also responsible for recruiting and onboarding, employee relations and employee engagement, compensation and benefits, and learning and development. HR is responsible for helping leaders mitigate risk so that the decisions that they take, actually the people decisions that they take, do not cause problems or issues for the company or for the business. HR is responsible for employee well-being, design policies and processes, managing performance and employee conduct cases, ensuring that the employee voice is heard, succession and workforce planning. And then this is added, providing the tools and information that managers need to help their team strive. From all of this, we would see that there's a lot of overlap between what HR does and what managers do, right? And what we'll find in some cases is that managers lead on a responsibility and HR provides support. And in some other cases, HR leads on it and managers, provide support or deliver. So for instance, in terms of recruiting and onboarding of team members, right? The manager will pass on the job requisition to HR. HR does the advert. HR receives the CVs. HR does some screening of the CVs, right? Pass on to the manager who does the shortlisting. HR at times helps with interview questions, job descriptions, and all of that. When the employee has been onboarded or has been decided as about to be onboarded, HR will usually be the one to lead around getting their workstation, getting their laptops, or this is what the induction should look like. But at the end of the day, it is the manager that is responsible for that team member, and the employee, whatever induction plan HR may have even put together, it's up to the manager to deliver that. So HR can put a wonderful induction or onboarding plan together, but if the manager doesn't do it well, the employee still has a poor induction or onboarding experience. That's an example of, HR leading on something and manager delivering. Let's take a case of managing performance, which is also where another overlap is managing performance and employee conduct. Usually, it's the manager that will feedback on whether a team doing appraisals or review or performance review periods. It's the manager that will feedback on because again, they're the ones that see the employee on what the employee is doing well or not doing well, right? Or what should for organizations that still use ratings, what should their ratings be, and all of that, right? HR is the one that collates, if I can use that word, all of that together and then says, oh, this is the appraisal for this team, this is the appraisal for that team. Um, and then it goes back to the managers to deliver on whether or not X is getting promoted or you're getting the salary increase or not, or whatever the result of the performance is, right? Employee conduct cases, in my experience, both in Nigeria and in the UK, usually HR would guide on that or give a framework of these decisions you can take or not take. But at the end of the day, it's up to the manager to say, oh, we're dismissing this person or we're not dismissing this person, for example, if it's an extreme, an extreme conduct case. So the manager decides that, but then usually it's HR that will write the letter and issue that. And I guess that's where at times, we get that thing of HR has fired me. People don't like HR because even though HR has not taken that decision, right, they're the ones delivering the outcomes to the employee. So yes, backgrounds, and now let's get to the meat of it. As a manager, how do I get? And I'll try to focus more on new managers, or yeah, new if you're managing for the first time. How do I get the people stuff right? I'm sure a couple of us would have heard this saying of people leave bad managers, not bad companies. Again, not always the case because people leave for whatever their life circumstances are, or maybe they're getting better remuneration or something, right? But if a manager has a very good rapport, or people feel that they're being recognized in their team, they usually improves retention, right? So I just went back. So you have started this by saying managers are the key drivers. 1 second. That managers are the key drivers of employee experience, and it is important that managers are aware of that impact, right? Managing people is just beyond what you know technically, right? It's about how you help people deliver on the job, and you would also find this, right? A lot of people become managers because they think that they've done well, it's individual contributions or individual performance, and it just feels like managing a team is natural progression or the reward of doing your job very well. Again, not the focus of this, but not everyone not everyone should manage people, but in reality, we find that that's not the case. So you're doing well, right? The next thing is, oh, manage this team, and all of the successes you had as an individual contributor, we now expect you to deliver the same as a manager. And you find that some people struggle, and well, some people were very relational and charismatic, at times might not, but managing people, a key takeaway for line managers on this call is that it's beyond what you know, it's beyond your area of focus that you know very well. So how can I manage people right? You have to start with yourself, first of all. Start with yourself. Identify what your leadership style is. There are lots of resources you can use to do that. You can ask people, right? People around you, people that know you well, what they think your leadership style is. But there are a lot of resources on the internet that can help identify that. I've put, which you won't be able to see now, but I've put in a link to one of such tools, which is like a personality insight test. And I've chosen this one by Daniel Goleman, and it was the one that they created a lot of an awareness around emotional intelligence, right? So it's own leadership quiz is just, or insight test is just one of the many available to managers to take. I would encourage new managers to first of all do that. And it's important you identify a leadership style because then you become aware of your strengths, right? The things you can do very well. You become aware of your weaknesses or what we can call your developmental areas, things you can improve upon. It also helps you to create a plan. So because you know yourself or you've identified, your strengths and weaknesses, you're able to create a plan of how can I then, knowing that this is who and what I am, how can I then manage my team. That's the first thing. So know yourself. And this knowing yourself would also speak to the point I'll get to about setting boundaries, right? So get that right, know yourself, and then don't just take the test and leave it. It will be to develop an action plan, because just taking test and knowing your style does not mean it's not the end of it. It's, then develop an action plan from that. Practice developing an action plan from that. Second thing is getting your recruitment right. This is always, in my experience, an area of tension between HR and managers, especially when it's a bad hire. A bad hire costs a lot. Apart from the monetary cost of the company, there's the time you've put in terms of the interviewing and all of that. There's time you spend on the probation. You've introduced the person to your team, and then you have to do all of that process again. So it's always very important to get recruitment right. If you have the opportunity to build your team or replace team members, because if you don't get it right, it does cause a lot of issues. And how can you get recruitment right? One is be clear about what good looks like. Or so I've got X number of roles in my team. What does good look like? What does a successful person in this role need to be able to do and demonstrate? Once you've been able to identify that, because HR would usually lean in. So while HR might help you do like the job description, for instance, HR usually leaning on you to give that guide, like those job description. And then in interviewing, if I can use that word, is to be very logical and rational and not sentimental in your interviewing. So because it's at the interview phase that you make decision on who you're hiring, right? So whatever questions you're going to be asking about the interview, let it be able to lead you to whether this person or not is going to be a right hire. It's not a fail proof method, but at least you should more than 50% get it right if you ask the right interviewing questions, or you're trained. So, and this would go when we get to the HR bit, we'll speak about that. You're trained, in interviewing skills. The third thing would be to know your team and build rapport with them. So you know yourself, you know your own style. It's very important again to know your team. You can know your team by observing. Of course, you would hear if, for instance, you grew as a pair, and then you were made a manager of a team that existed before. You probably already know the personality types that comprise the team, right? And you probably have to do some work, because you're now growing. You've now gone a step above, former team members or former colleagues. You probably have to learn things or be supported on how to, manage them. But if it's a case that you're not very, you've not met team before, I would share. Mr. Rashid, can you help me share that? I'll share something now that you can use it as what we call a starter for 10, that to help you develop an understanding of what each team member is. Are you able to share the hello? Okay, I'm not sure. 1 second. Let me get that up. What I want to share, the tool I want to share.
Okay.
So yeah, can everyone see this? Can everyone see my screen? Oh yeah, I've seen a thumbs up. That's fine. Thank you. Right. So this is something I use in the organization I work with, and it was a colleague that shared this. So she calls it. She was one that created this, and then shared it with the number of us. She calls it washing instructions, and for her, she gives this to any new member of the team to complete again, because this kind of works for her, right? To complete, so that she knows what the preferences are, and then she can work with that, right? So that's completed, but it's basically something like this, who you are, of course, with how they like to be how they like to be contacted or communicated with, what conditions they like to work in, what support they need from me as a manager. If again that part of things I'm working on is if, for instance, there's already an existing team that you're joining, what are you working on? Things they struggle with, things they love. Again, this can be amended, but just gives an idea of if I was meeting a team member that I don't know, or I'm trying to develop a relationship with, how do I go about it? How do I ask about, instead of just saying, tell me about yourself, all of that, what are the things I can do to be able to connect with them? So this dishwashing instruction, you know, can do the job. I'll stop my screen now and go back to the presentation. Yeah, back to that. So yes, so knowing your team and building a rapport, the right rapport with them is quite vital because again, you're relying on them to deliver on the objectives the organization has already given you to deliver on. So moving on, and I'm going to stay on this part of it. It's about communicating clearly and managing consistently. This is an area where managers are trying to miss it, and it causes some of the employee relationship issues that HR is sometimes called in to deal with or help resolve, right? So as a manager, you probably have the first view of what the priorities are. You and your team members discuss, this is what we're expected to deliver. You can give your team member a list of 20 things that are the priorities, but the 20 things are not the priorities immediately. There'll be probably one or two that you need them to focus on and deliver. Maybe the others are good to do. What I found in my experience is that managers just communicate and say, oh, these are the 20 things. So whereas for you, maybe number three and four are the most important things, the employee is doing number five and six, which is easier for them to do. Or the employee may even be doing 5 to 20, which they find easier to do. But the main, the core priorities, because that's not been communicated to them, they're not focusing on that. And then appraisal or reviews come and it's like, oh, you've not done anything. And the person is feeling, but I've done number 5 to 20, right? And but number 5 to 20 do not carry as much weight as number two and three. So it's been very clear on what is expected of the employee. Clarity is very key. And on the managing consistently part, right? If you've got a team of more than 2 or 3 people, you need to be seen to be managing them fairly and consistently. Doesn't mean that you manage people the same way, no, because we're human beings and we're all different. But you ensure that whatever decisions you make, especially the again, quote and unquote, the soft ones, whatever decisions you make are justifiable. They're not coming from a place of bias. And I'll give an example, right? It's usually the case, again, from my experience, I might be wrong, but it's usually the case that you might have a team of 4 people and you'd have one person that goes above and beyond and is over pulling their weight. The others are not necessarily floating, they just do their job and they leave. Or you have one person that you know that come what may, I can rely on this person to deliver. It is usually easy for a manager to want to encourage, again, quote and unquote, that person, um, and reward them using informal, um, informal means. So maybe other people are supposed to. This is a very simplified example. Maybe everyone's supposed to close at 4 o'clock, but because Damola is always delivering, Damola can get close at 2 o'clock, or Damola can leave or come in when she wants because she delivers, right? Um, and you just allow that, and it's not addressed. That's a form of reward, but it's not the right form of reward because people say it, and again, it will be coming across to them as not fair. And those are part of the things that cause team dysfunction. And by the time we want to address it, you're going to have to do a lot around the team, building team maintenance and building cohesiveness again. So if you've got a star performer on your team, one thing I always tell because it happens with some of the managers I work with a lot, where they won't take a decision. And actually, my challenge to them is always, if it was Darry, so assuming Darry is their star performer, and it's a not so palatable decision, right? And they won't take it. I was like, if it was Darry that, for instance, committed this misconduct, and the range of decisions can say, for instance, give them a formal warning, or give them, a first written warning, or, give them a verbal one and all of that. If it was Dari that did this, what would your decision be? If, for instance, it was Dari that did it, you were going to give a verbal warning. Ideally, that already shows where your leaning should be. There is no need, and again, this is me giving an example. Some managers I work with, there's no need to go for the hard one because you feel that this is my opportunity to deal with, say, Damola that has not been listening or doesn't do things the way I want her to do it, right? So let me give her a first written warning so that she know I'm serious, right? So I always challenge them to, if this is your star performer for this um, negative decision, what would you do? And for the ones that, on the flip side, where it's that you're taking a positive decision, right? If it was, Damola that's not so, that just does a job and leaves at 5 o'clock, right? If you're going to take a decision, what would you do? So that internal check of, if this was my best person, what would I do? Actually helps to, check your bias and ensure that you're trying as much as possible to treat your people with equity. Again, I'm caveating it to say that it doesn't mean you have to treat people the same way. It's not possible to treat people the same way. Moving on to that is to be prepared to challenge unacceptable behavior, right? When things that are happening, that should not be happening are happening, don't let it slide. This doesn't then mean that you call out, say, Akiemi publicly and say, you've done this and that, you shouldn't do that. No, you can you can have private conversations with them, but have those conversations. And this is HR company now, and document having those conversations um, around unacceptable behavior, whether it's relating to their performance, whether it's relating to conduct, and whether they're your superstars or not. Be managers, a lot of managers are not very comfortable having the hard and difficult conversations. If it's that ahead of having the conversation, you need to prepare, you need to write out, and that I do with some of my managers, write out everything you're going to say, right, with the examples, um, address it. Because if you don't address it, people notice. And what you're indirectly doing is that you're giving others permission to do the same, which you don't want on your team. So whether you've got for some of us, we have team members with very, very strong personalities, or I don't just want this person struggling, right? Or this person knows the MD, or this person knows the chairman of the board, or all of that, right? The MD still wants their job. The chairman of the board still wants a company that would, be profitable. If someone is not doing their job, at the end of the day, for them, for most people, for most rational people, that is, the bottom line matters more than, whether or not you've told off um, someone have given a job for not doing their job properly. And on to more positive things is to remember to praise excellent performance and conduct. So yes, you've got your star performance. Is very, very important that you recognize them, or you recognize them using your formal recognition methods. You recognize them by advocating for them, speaking for them in rooms that they may not be able to speak for themselves, letting people know that this person actually does an excellent job. And at times, you're praising the excellent performance or conduct might mean that they're not leaving your team for better things, or new opportunities. But it's a win-win and a net benefit to the organization, right? So don't over rely on your staff performance such that they burn out, or they're the ones, or what we say at times, that the reward of good work is more work. You shouldn't do that with your staff performance. Is to ensure that they're appropriately supported using the right channels to continue to deliver on the job. Speaking back to the manager now, it would be to develop yourself, so you know your people, you know your technical stuff, you know your job very well. You can do your job sleeping, but well, not unfortunately, but you don't know the HR stuff or the people stuff like HR does. So I'd explain that, right? HR is usually very well aware and knowledgeable about people risk, employment law, employment legislation, what's changing, how do you do this, how do you not do that. So it would be very good for you as a manager to attend and learn from sessions, opportunities that build your skills as a people manager, right? Because this is something some people, again, as I mentioned before, do this naturally and they know it naturally, but it doesn't come naturally to a lot of people, but it can be learned if you choose to. So HR is organizing sessions around performance management, having difficult conversations, just doing things around how do you do probation right and all of that. Don't just keep them and feel like, me spending 2 hours doing this is a waste of time. No, it's not, right? Even if you feel like, oh, I don't have any problem person on my team, still attend that difficult conversations training, because when you do, right, the time when you do need to have difficult conversations with somebody, you're equipped, you already have the knowledge to be able to handle those conversations. Related to this is leaning on your HR. Again, like I said before, right? HR knows the laws. You might know some, but you won't know it in detail as HR does, because it's HR's job to know. So when they do give you advice, right, at times it might be uncomfortable advice, or it might not be something you want to do. But if you take anything away from today's session, it will be that you should lean into them and listen, right, and take it, because at the end of the day, you might be saving yourself, you know, issues down the line. And back to what I said about identifying leadership earlier, setting boundaries, being aware of your own well-being needs, and having your own self-care habits. As a manager, it's almost like your parents. Everyone in the team comes to you for everything. Boss, have you got 5 minutes? Boss, have you got 10 minutes? Boss this, boss that. Before you know it, right? You've not even done, actually, if you have to do other things, you've not even done your own job, because you're attending to everyone else. So let your team be very transparent about, when you're available to your team, what you can support with, what you can't support with. As managers too, related to this is, be careful about taking on everything. Learn to be able to delegate, right? So if someone has come to you with a problem, what do they think the solution, as opposed to, already giving them what the solution to the problem is, so you brought this to me. What do you think the solution can be? Of course, there are times you have to step in and be very directive and be like, this is what we should do. But, learn not to take on a lot, because you're just one person. And then the final thing I will mention is giving yourself grace. You won't always get it right as a people manager. There'll be decisions you take that, were not the right decision at the time. Like the times you get things really wrong, but take it as a lesson. Rather than beat yourself about it, it'll be to take it as a lesson and use it, put it in whatever, if I can call it that, your knowledge toolkit of how you do things better the next time. Any questions, any contributions at this point before we move into the last section? No, I can't see the chat. Okay, yeah, Victoria, I got a question. Yep, please carry on.
Okay, good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you. I know I didn't join from the beginning, but I got a particular area you talked about, delegation.
Yeah.
Now, there's some cases where you find out you're the only person handling this role as an HR. And just as you said, every department rather has a line manager, but there are some persons that prefer to bring it directly to HR. Like they feel their line manager cannot handle this. And oftentimes you've drawn their attention to the fact that you don't just bring things to HR, you go through your line manager, but you always have the staff or several of them that will say, no, HR can handle it better. Let me get to her. And at some point it gets overwhelming and you want to be like, okay, this person is standing, this person is waiting, this person is waiting. How do you bring it to their understanding that, no, you're not supposed to bring everything to me. You're supposed to pass through your line manager, and whereby that person cannot handle it. then HR comes in. But there's just some very funny stuff. Let me not use the word stubborn. Very funny stuff that will definitely bring it to you. How do you handle such cases? Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. This I have direct experience. I have direct experience with, so I can totally relate. So I'll give you. So what I have done, right? Where I found that people come directly to me as opposed to their manager is the first thing that you've done is, have you spoken to your manager? If you've not spoken to your manager about it, or go back to your manager, right? Go back to your manager. If you then feel that your manager is not has not handled it, right? Then you can come to me. And I'm also always clear to people, because what I found, at least in my own experience, is that they feel they already they would not like the decision that their manager would take. And at times they come into HR to raise it so that HR overrides that decision. So again, where I found that that's the case, I'm always very clear to them to say, I'm not your manager and I'm not your manager's manager, right? So if your manager is able to justify, so if your manager is taking the wrong decision, I could definitely, speaking to the part about employee voice, I can definitely challenge them on that, right? If it's not the right decision. But if it's a reasonable and fair decision, just be prepared. So I'm always very clear to them and upfront to them. And the fact that you brought this to me does not mean I'm going to override your manager's decision, or that you get something different from me. What I've also done practically in some of those cases is, when they come to me on the raises and all of that, and I'm like, speak to your manager, and I know that they will speak to their manager before they leave my office, it's that, oh, just so that we're clear, and just in case, I know you're very busy, you might miss this, or things might move on, just so it's top of mind to you. I'm going to send you an email, and copy in or mobile your manager, so that at least this way we can have that discussion, and whatever it is that you discuss, you can or agree, you can then come back to me. But you have to hold the line, if I can use that word, in referring them back to their manager, right? And at least in my own experience, it did stop. When they know that your first question is always go back to your manager, or at times, like you say, some might be standing, and let them know you've tried, you've waited 2 days to see me to discuss this, right? You could have gotten an answer 2 days ago if you just, raise it with your manager. Does that help?
Sure, it does. Thank you.
Thank you. So we'll move on now. Now I need to.
Okay. Good evening.
Could
Can
it be?
you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, great. So I have a question. So my question is, how do you handle situation where managers are shying away from their responsibilities? Like, they're supposed to manage these employees, and when they have issues with their downliners, they just push them to HR. They just want HR to like step in ASAP and um, absolve themselves of managing whatever challenge that is going on between themselves and the employee. They are just basically after getting the task done, right? But in terms of managing like the employee experience, communicating culture and all of that, they just say it's HR's job. How do you manage such manager and get them to know that it's a partnership thing? It's not just, this is something that they are supposed to integrate in their day-to-day interaction with their downliners.
Wait, sorry. Are you in a standalone HR role, or you've got
Yes.
so you're just the only HR in the organization?
Yes.
And you're likely just reporting to the CEO, correct?
Yes, COO, and but there are other like team leads that now manages the different teams.
So if you report to the CEO, what's the CEO's view on you taking on, is this something you've discussed with them?
You mean the CEO or
Yeah,
the
about managers trying to push some of the things that they should be doing to you.
well, I mean, so that's the thing. The CEO, well, I haven't tried to bring it up to him. However, I haven't tried to bring it up, but I keep telling the managers that, this is part of what they are supposed to do.
Yes.
But I
So the
haven't
reason
brought
I've said about the CEO thing is because if you keep telling the managers, but it's not being done, right? Then maybe it probably not that maybe it probably needs a higher level of addressing. Because I was having this conversation with someone recently where it was like HR is responsible for culture. Yes, HR is responsible or can shape culture, but culture is delivered. What's culture? Culture is what the employee experiences every day at work. That's what your actual culture is, no matter what the strategy on culture says, right? So the managers need to be. You probably need a higher level of intervention in communicating that clearly to them, right? That's one. Two would be, again, things that I've done is find out from the manager. And I put that, this is part of, I will still go through this slide about regular checking with managers to build a trusted advisor relationship with what's your grade. So using the example of some of the managers I've worked with where they have, they're not able to, they're not that they're not able to, they're very, very uncomfortable having difficult conversations, right? I'll give an example. So where this person that, the performance wasn't managed, all of that, and the manager was refusing to do it. Right. So at some point we have to have a sit down. What's your greatest fear? Why are you not able to address these issues with this person, seeing the stress that it's causing you? And then the person opened up about some of their own personality, I'm not confrontational, I'm not this, I'm not that. And then we began to help that person around us because it's your job as the manager to have both to give both the good news and the bad news. So what I did with that person, with that manager was a lot of coaching around, this how to have this conversation. And like I said before, even if it comes to the part of writing things down, write out everything. So with this manager, write out everything you want to tell this person. What are the issues? Again, very clear feedback. These are the things you're doing well. These are the things you're not doing very well. Write it out, right? And we'll go into a meeting with that person. So what I've done with some of them is to then attempt to, that meeting with them, not leading the meeting, but there for support. So Damola, according to this meeting, because XYZ has happened, and we'll like to talk about how to, to change things, right? So it was a lot of, it did take a lot. When I say it did take a lot, it took about like almost six months to 1 year. So eventually get it right with this person. But it was a lot of coaching, right? So you might have to do that on one hand, but then you need your senior leadership to be able to intervene and say, actually, sorry, I can't see your name and all of that, but this person is not going to be effective in their job, right? If they're having to step in. So organizations do good cop, bad cop, but assuming your name is my name, Damola, should not always be the person delivering. She's not the person's line manager. She doesn't have the examples, she doesn't have the experience. And part of your role as a manager is to be able to, give feedback. So you might have to take it, approach it in the two ways. One, get your senior leadership or your manager to intervene, but then work with that manager or those managers. Maybe that that becomes your priority on coaching them to be able to have those conversations. But Omoba, you raised your hand up. So does that answer the question? I don't know what's
Lean
answered
forward,
question,
that's it.
yeah. Omoba,
Lean
you've
forward.
got a
Yes, ma'am.
question.
Stretch your back. That's it, ma'am.
Hello, good evening, Ms. Damola. Thank you once again for showing up for us, and well done. Yes, just to as an add-on to some of the things that you clearly very well explained. Both for the first lady that asked the question and the other lady as well. one of the things that does not allow for some people to take on being able to have difficult conversations with their, downliners, or, when they're leading a team, is because there's no clarity as to their role as team leads or as line managers. So in the UK, they have people that are just managers. They don't have any staff that they manage. They're just called managers. So they just manage the job and the work and all of that they do. But they have some that are called line managers. And that was because, just like Damola said, some people do not have the temperament, the kind of personality to manage people, but they can manage the work very well. So the ones that they would use as line managers are the people that they know have that temperament, because you're going to go through an interview anyway before you can become a line manager. So they will know that you have the temperament. So one of the things that you need to do in your organization is to state clearly what the roles of those managers or the line managers are, and what the escalation, cutoff should be before they can bring it to you as HR to then intervene into whatever the situation is. And just like she said, sometimes, you would have, we call them like an observer. So if you have someone you are unable to have difficult conversations with, you have an observer in the room so that they kind of, give you that support. And it is so, we cannot overemphasize the fact that you must write down, no matter how confident you are as a manager, write down everything you want to discuss, you want to say. It is very, very important. They used to call, HR people back then, that when you see us, you don't see a pen and paper with us, a pen and a notebook. It is always there, because not only are you going to write down what you want to say, you're also writing down everything that the other person is saying as much as you can, because at some point you're going to read it back to them to say, did I get you well? Was this what you stated? Did I understand? Did I capture this very well? And then you can make amends wherever there's a gap in what you've been able to capture. So first you must, if it's not a culture within your organization, you must start building that culture of saying, this is where we draw the line for me to intervene, for me not to intervene. If it doesn't get to this stage, it doesn't have to come to me. And all of these things, you also need to let them know that, you have your own work, and the more they keep, intruding into your own time, you will not be able to do it. But that can be on a high level when you're talking to the higher managers and the CEOs and COOs, and let them know that if this thing does not become a culture within the organization, this is the impact it's going to have on your work. And those people will not grow as managers. They will never grow, because if you don't deal with situations, you won't grow. You won't be able to, it's the more you surmount the situations you deal with, the more knowledge and experience you gather as you go along. So those are some of the things that I would want you to go back with, alongside what all the other training that we've gotten tonight, that it has to be, it has to be clear cut. Otherwise, you would always have that intrusion into your personal time, and they will always bring it. The more you take it on, the more they'll bring it to you. That's the fact. The more they see that you're able to take on, you just become a dumping ground for them. Oh, no, this is not our job. HR will sort it out. Sometimes they are afraid because they don't want to face it. Sometimes it's because they genuinely feel that it's not their responsibility, to brief query or to have, difficult conversations or to do this and that. So you really need to start pushing that forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Amoba. And yeah, you've kind of touched on my first point on how HR can help. So just building up, I won't over explain that first point. But how can HR help managers be good managers? And the first one I said, if you can reading it, is that help build their skill sets, right? Especially for people like Amoba has mentioned, that might have been individual performers, right? Individual contributors who, like I said before, management has just thought the natural progression of all of the good work that they've done is for them to become people managers. So in your organization, how should interviews be conducted? How do we manage probation? How do we have conversations, difficult conversation that we just said? What's our approach to pay and promotion, right? So it's good for money when it comes, especially when it comes to that remuneration. And again, hopefully a lot of managers understand the need for confidentiality, that the fact that, HR or senior management shares some information with you does not then mean you share that with your team. But giving managers those understanding, right? Actually around this pay, because that's another issue, that's another area of, if I can use the word, tension. Giving them an understanding of how these things are done, right, helps them again to know how to approach and discuss these things with their team. Second is provide support materials, so toolkits, at least in my own organization, we created a lot of toolkits. One around, having well-being conversations, having difficult conversations, my employee scenarios, my team members come to say XYZ, right? The toolkits for that they can easily refer to. One thing when you're creating toolkits is to keep it simple. Again, remembering that managers already have a lot to deal with, and they probably will not read a 5-page or 10-page document. How can you pass on the information you want to pass on to them, or the support you want to pass on to them on paper? How can you, make it as concise as possible? One thing that I've done in my organization that's also worked well for me is, so managers have this one pager where it's just HR needs to know, right? And this is my responsibility as a manager. So at least the first level and second level managers in my organization know that, again, speak to the example of the escalation point, that if it's not in Damola's box of HR needs to know, you don't bring it to Damola or anybody in our team, right? We can deal with that. You can come, at a later point, you see us during lunch or something, say, oh, I just want to let you know this. That's fine, but you're not bringing it to us. So keep it simple, but have those manuals and scripts too. So for some of the managers, we already have scripts written where what they then need to just do is plug in the examples. And I also always tell managers, and I'm sharing this again too, there's nothing wrong with you going into a meeting to say that, to be sure that I'm very prepared and so that we're having a proper and honest and unbiased conversation. I've written down all of these things and I'm going to be referring to my notes. There is nothing wrong with being upfront and clear to the team member about that. Conduct show and tells for managers on any HR policies and processes being introduced. So again, you give them the high level, oh, this is the employment law changes, or this is what this means, right? Speak to the managers. So if it's that, it doesn't always have to be that you're bringing them into a training or bringing them out. It could be that you're going to their team meetings to explain this is what's changing, or they've got manager meetings. This is what's changing. This is what this means for you. This is what you should know. This is what you should come to me for as HR if you need any support. Be transparent. This I find a lot, and it's very important for us in HR to be very transparent on the risk and rationale behind whatever advice we give, right? Because again, some of the time managers think that we're giving the advice just because, which is not the case. And it's at times we feel like, oh, can I be open? There's a lot of confidential information that we hold. Can we be open to managers about that? As much as possible without breaking confidentiality, let them know, right? And so one thing that's also worked in the previous organization I've worked with is some of the ER cases or conduct cases that we deal with, right? We anonymize them and share them with managers so that they learn from them. Oh, so this is what this was the result. What could we have done differently? Again, you're already a manager might not have that problem yet in their team, but if they have a similar problem in their team, they will likely refer to that because probably read it somewhere, so it's at the back of their mind. This next point worked very well in one organization that I also worked with. It was to organize peer-to-peer learning circles and sharing sessions for managers. So HR doesn't have to be part of it, but you've got model managers who role model what a good manager should be, right? You can organize sessions where these managers are sharing their own experiences with fellow managers so that those ones learn from that, and also have support outside of HR that they can go to for advice. And I mentioned this before, it's regular checking with managers to build that trusted advisor relationship. So they don't have to come to you before you go to them, right? So I've like a schedule. So are we meeting? So am I having for me, for instance, with senior leadership, my direct peers, I have weekly one-to-ones with some of them, monthly one-to-ones with some of them, some is bi-weekly. With the managers below, at monthly, with those below quarterly, but there's always that visibility and checking in with them so that, before even issues brew or they're thinking about stuff, they've already surfaced that. And if you need to influence their ideas or their views at that point, you're able to do that. And finally, is to encourage a culture of feedback, right? And this is directly with teams. Part of some of the issues organizations sometimes face is that employees, that is the people on what I'll call the shop floor, feel like, we're not heard, nothing's going to change. And at HR level, we can influence that. And we could, again, influence that by being visible. If you're, for instance, the head of HR or a senior, it doesn't have to be you doing that. If you've got HR business partners, admin, coordinate, your HR coordinators, you can use them to, you can use them as avenues to be able to get feedback that you can then feed into to the managers that you're supporting. Oh, we've heard this, we've heard X, Y, and Z, right? Is there anything to it? Or it might not be true, but it's something you should be aware of and you should work on, right? When people see that some of the feedback that they gave is being actioned, they come up with, they're more confident to surface stuff. And when they surface stuff, it's better for the organization, and it's also better for you as a manager because you're able to deal with things, before they escalate. That's that from me. We'll take more questions, more contributions now. Everyone's got the floor. Any questions or comments? I can't see Uncle K. Yeah, I can see that now. Yeah, carry on. Okay, Dari. Yep.
Hi, thank you very much. This was really interesting to learn, especially from the line manager side. I have a question. Obviously, a lot of organizations are going through structural changes, and there's a lot of sort of business pressure. How can one handle the business pressure, like the conflict that you have to deliver, for your team to deliver, but also alongside the employee well-being? And are there any toolkits that you would advise HR, that HR can support on, that we can ask our HR teams to provide?
Right. So to be clear, so so the question is, as a manager, how do I balance the business needs versus some of the restructuring that is happening?
Yes, productivity, employee well-being, retention, and then what support can a line manager request from HR with that?
So I'll start with what support can a line manager request from HR. Would go back to part of what I've just shared. So my team is coming to me on questions, say, for instance, it's redundancy in my team, and we've not yet announced, for instance, who's at risk or who's likely going to be made redundant. And my team is coming to me for that. I'm a new manager. I don't know how to approach that. You can definitely go to your HR for that, on guide on how to have those conversations, right? But speaking to the first point about balancing the business pressures and managing productivity. So first of all, if your organization is going to restructuring, I think at a senior level, there'll be a slight expectation that until it's completed, performance might dip and wouldn't be what it should be because everyone is worried. Usually, I don't know if your organization does, and I hope they do. They usually support, for those of us who are from Nigeria, I don't know, you can just, comment if it's a thing in Nigeria now, where you've got like employee assistance programs. Is that a thing? No, I guess not.
Yeah, well, it depends on the organization actually.
Sure. Right.
For
So if
multinational, yeah, they can
that's
apply.
right.
It's not popular yet.
It's
It's
not
not
popular
popular
yet.
yet, but some are already taking it on. Yeah.
On right. So if your organization does have one, it will be to use those because they're partial and independent, right? It will be to use it will be for you as a manager to signpost your team members to use those resources. In cases where, say, you're in Nigeria and it's not a thing and people are genuinely worried, I think this is where the giving yourself grace and knowing what you need to focus on as a manager comes in, because you probably be the one carrying all of that, and you probably have to be the one giving them assurance. So again, it's been realistic as to until this is over, until the restructuring is over, probably my job as a manager is providing assurance and reassurance and supporting the team's well-being in the sense of, well, you can't ask them not to worry. They will worry, but it's what can we do? What's in our control? What's not in our control? And trying to focus on that, whilst also again taking a step back where it becomes too difficult. Back to what I said before about setting boundaries and your own self-care, knowing where things might be, where I'm not able to support with this. It's very fine to be able to tell your team, and I think that they won't mind that. I don't have the answer. I don't know this. Let's wait and see and just carry on. Does that help?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Thank you.
And if you don't mind, can I ask another question?
Okay, so it was sure.
Oh no, sorry. I'm happy to pass on and come back to me. Thank you.
Okay, I'll come back to you. I can see Oludotun.
Thank you very much. Damola, that's been a very wonderful presentation so far.
Thank you.
Oh, great. So I had a question during an interview session. There was a question that was asked. All right, so the HR reports to the MD, and then
Right.
the MD, of course, has board of directors, okay, that probably is answerable to. Okay, so the MD has the question. So if the MD of a company starts misbehaving and then maybe commit some fraud or some things that contravene to the policy of the company, as the HR of the company, what do you do? How do you handle it?
Right. So two approaches to this, right? So if you're in the UK, that's kind of almost simple to handle, because with that, as HR, so you report to probably the CEO, whatever, but you still kind of like have a line to the board, so you can take that up directly with the board, right? Because if your CEO has committed a misconduct, an investigation will need to be done. You're not assuming, or if there's an allegation of a misconduct, right? It needs to be investigated, because the CEO, even if they're the owner of the company, at least in the UK, it still needs to be investigated and checked whether or not there's some truth to it. If there's some truth, to it, then you follow your processes. If it's in
that was my answer.
Nigeria,
That was my answer actually. But the
okay.
MD said that you don't report directly to the board.
No, you at least in my experience, you have a line to the board.
Oh, really?
Yes, you'd have a line to the board through the people committee or remuneration committee or whatever the committee is. You would have, as the head of HR, in my experience, you would have a line to the board.
Okay. All right.
So you can take that up there, because it needs to be, even if it needs to be investigated, right? Because they might be true to you, they might be not true to you, but it needs to be investigated. And yeah. You would have, because there's also a conflict of interest for the CEO, right? You can't investigate yourself, so that would need to be separate. Yep. Chinyere.
Okay, so you were not giving a scenario in Nigeria.
Oh, sorry. Yes. So if it's Nigeria, yes, sorry, Mr. If it's Nigeria, though, might be dicey. But if you've got a compliance function, you can raise it confidentially, but it still needs to be, regardless, it still needs to be investigated and checked, right? Even if they were the owner of the company, because in these days where there's a lot of reputation, there's a lot of companies face more in social media, companies face more, and we can give examples of companies like that. Companies face more reputational risk, right? Someone has said something, you don't do anything about it, you don't investigate it, and then next thing you're seeing it on social media. And even this year alone, we can give examples of where we've seen, senior leaders in organizations in Nigeria, facing the wrath of social media for misconduct. So yeah, you will still need to check that out,
All right.
regardless.
Very well. Yeah. Well, you said, of course, you need to investigate, right? That's very, very apt. But how do you investigate? So, Disola just mentioned whistleblowing.
Yeah, there's whistleblowing in the UK. I don't know if I'm not sure it's very strong in Nigeria, right? Or Speak Up. I'm not sure that's very strong. But if someone has made an allegation, and it's the same regardless, so if you made an allegation, you should be prepared to back up the allegation with evidence or why you think that this is. So you need to give people, you need to give HR, or if it's compliance that then takes over because it's a senior person, you need to give them something to work on, right? You can't just make a malicious, well, it might not be malicious, but you can't just make an allegation, right, without anything for the team to investigate. So I can't just say, for instance, Dotun slaps Damola without saying what date happened, when it happened, if there were any witnesses, right? So the report or the allegation should at least come with basic things that can form the basis of an investigation. Is that
okay?
Clear?
Yes, I think it's clear.
Thank you very
If
much.
I
Thank you.
Okay, if I might just add a little bit to that. Yes, in most structures in Nigeria, most organizational structure in Nigeria, the organogram is such that HR does not really report to the board, reports to the MD or the CEO. I think it's only majorly, I say most structures anyway, it is the audit that has a dotted reporting line to the board and also to the MD. Okay, so in most organizations like that, HR's hand may be tied, and sometimes they may have a dotted reporting line to maybe the governance committee or something like that at the board. Okay, but in a scenario like that, I think somebody has dropped the answer. It's good to have something documented to the MD. If there's a mail where you will just write and say your view that MD, in my view, I think this breaches the process of the organization, or this can be seen as an infringement or something, that is, just advise that thing in an email. Have it on record that you have said your own. Keep the email, even if you know that what this man has done is outrightly wrong, or has gone against the policy of the organization, or has done something illegal. Have it documented. And if you have a very strong whistleblower system, usually I don't advise that, but you might have to do that and do a whistleblower, okay, with substantial evidence, that they won't have to come back and say, well, this is baseless and doesn't have sufficient information to see it through. So if you have sufficient information to back it up, you could do an anonymous whistleblower if you strongly feel that, well, the good in that whistleblower is better than what the MD is doing. So in that kind of structure, well, that might just be it for you. So sorry to have jumped in.
Yeah, that's fine. Sure, we'll come to you. But in the case where audit might have a reporting line, because you don't know whether the CEO has done it, this MD has committed the misconduct or not, right? So if you're sending them and you don't want to tip them off, so I would be wary about but that's my own personal view, about sending the CEO an email just to say that this has been said about you and all of that, because you don't know whether they've done it or not. And if they've done it, you don't want to tip off beforehand. So if the lines were, for instance, HR does not have like a line to the board, right, but has a line to audit, it could be, and I use the word compliance, it could be that you raise that with them and just check it out. Is there any truth to this? Except maybe they've brought you the evidence and it's very clear that this CEO has done all of this, then maybe that email will work. But I would say if you're not sure, then maybe do some investigation first. Chihiri, I'm trying to look at the time. Please, you have the floor.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. Thank you very much, Samala. Yeah, I have two questions. One is relatively to this one that is just being answered, and that is when the evidence is very glaring, and that line manager, maybe it's related to the chairman of the board, and there are evidences that this person was involved in a fraud, and they'll say, no, just forget this person. Other staff members will be investigated, but for this person, just forget it. How would you handle that? The evidences is so glaring, they were involved in a fraud, but the chairman's wife would say, no, for this person, don't talk about it. You can go on investigating others. One. Two, when you have a line manager that is very toxic, people have been reporting about that same person. You've tried reaching out to the person one-on-one, and most times she will just feel like, HR cannot do me anything. I know the chairman's wife. So at that point too, how do you handle such manager? Because me, I've tried once trying to send a mail to the GM who I report to and copy the executive director. I just did a mail to make it official, like you said, just to have something to back up, because people are living out of her toxicity. She's very toxic. You'll be in meeting, people are standing to complain about her. They are even crying. But at that point, there is nothing you can do. So how do you handle such situation as a HR?
This is well, it's quite surprising that because it's quite surprising to me if the chairman's wife is saying, but so this is the chairman's wife and not the chairman, correct?
Yes, not the chairman, but
So
the wife
question
of
will
the
be, are you
chairman.
able to tie this to your bottom line? Because if I'm losing money, I don't think, and that's why I use the word surprising, because if I'm losing money because of someone's misconduct that is not being, that's not been addressed, and I'm still saying, well, I don't mind losing this money, just leave the person. I would find that very surprising. So maybe another approach would be to show in monetary terms the cost of this person's behavior. So if 5 people have left and we've had to replace them, how much has that cost us? Maybe if you put it in naira terms, that might be something. Well, I don't know the dynamics of the chairman and the wife's relationship and all of that, but maybe putting things in naira and kobo terms might help. And if that doesn't help, this may be where you lean back on your understanding that, which I tell people, I tell some colleagues at times in my team, is as HR, we're not advisors, we're not enforcers, right? We're not decision makers, we're advisors. And I mentioned that at the beginning where, you give advice or you say, this is not the right thing to do, or this is the right thing to do, don't do it. And I don't know. So good that you send the email, right? And you've been able to document that, but maybe try another approach as to showing the cost of this person's behavior for the second one. I think the first one is related to that. Could you remind me of the first question again?
Person is involved in fraud with glaring evidence.
Yeah,
but the immunity, they said, forget this person. You can go ahead and take actions on the other staff members, but this person should be exonerated, even when the evidence
person is a line
clear.
manager.
Yeah, he's a line manager.
And have they seen? So is a question again. that the chairman and the wife would have to answer. And maybe at this point again, you just document that this is it, and this was the instruction I was given. If your values can allow, again, some of it might be values. Do I want to be in this kind of organization in the first instance? But again, that's a separate conversation. It's to document, like you've done before, that X, Y, and Z were involved in all of this. To be clear, you're saying remove Damola and then investigate the other people. Just so if it comes, if the shoe drops, is that you were very clear in advice, and be prepared to challenge and be clear on why, everyone should be investigated. But it's quite interesting that, you've got, it sounds like a family-owned business, but you don't mind losing money to cater to a family member or a relative or whatever the relationship is. But yeah, in that case, it will be to have it documented, like you've done the other one, that you said this person should not be investigated, and let them come back to you. Or they might not even come back to you, but at least you've got your evidence for that. And yeah, more for you is the values. Is that the place you want to be? But really, there's not much you can do if the business owner, is refused to take action. Omoba, and then we'll go back to Dari.
Thank you. You just about hit the nail on the head when you say, for me, you're in a toxic environment. There seem to be sacred cows that are untouchable within the organization because of nepotism. Somebody knows somebody who knows another person. That's not a place for a solid HR person to be. One of the ethos of being an HR is that if anything is going wrong, leaving is always an option. Resignation is an option. So you can explore that. Start, looking at your exit, planning towards your exit, because there's no point in you looking at things that are not being done the right way. In the first instance, when you join the organization, one of the things that I always push for HR people is that when you join any organization, what are their consequence management like? What happens? What is the, I'm trying to use the right words now. What sort of framework or structure do they have in place for consequence management? Is it to such extent that it can affect, the MD or the CEO, who is the owner of the organization, or are they exonerated from that? So there's no consequences to anything that they do? Or is it to such extent that, okay, if it's that MD, then we are going to call in external auditors or forensic auditors or something, that can come and look at it? If that's not in an organization, that organization is not going to, there's something already wrong where you have people that are untouchable. It's already wrong. So if you join an organization, these are some of the things that you should look out for. And they are red flags if they are not in place. They are red flags. So for me, start planning your exit. Just put your exit, kickstart your exit plan, because all of these things has to be in place. You can't have an organization where someone is telling you, not even the MD, is the MD's wife. Maybe they're in cohorts together. That's why they don't want that person to investigate them. Or they don't want anybody to query them. Maybe they're doing it together, and it's a case of, if this person gets exposed, it's going to have a knock-on effect on me as the MD's wife. So it's not a good place for you to be placed. And for anybody else, that's on this call, it's not a good place. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Omoba. Dari?
Hi, yes, thanks for coming back to me and some amazing questions. I just have like a really general question about HR capabilities over the next 5 years and what would be most critical for managers. There's a lot of organizational changes going across the globe, and I want to know what you've kind of observed and what you advise managers to be most prepared for.
That's a big one. In my view, it will be the ability to deal with change and to be adaptable and flexible, because things are very fluid and things would always change. A business could have like you said before, a business can have a priority today and tomorrow is facing a restructure or things change. So it's that ability to be able to manage change and be flexible that I would say is a skill that managers and everyone generally should have the ability to be able to adapt and for lack of a better, I'll go with the flow. Given the work environment that we have, that we have now, would be a great skill.
Thank you.
You're welcome. One last question. I don't want us to go. We're almost hitting the 130 minutes mark.
Okay,
So last question,
before
last
we leave
comment.
that, before we leave that, can I quickly chip in something to that question?
Sure.
Okay, so part of the future of HR to me is that I think, well, it's not future anymore. It's actually here that HR is more and more people-centered now. So, and also part of what we're going into is the emergence of AI, and how that is also going to be changing the world of work. So, yeah, you have said it that persons should be adaptive. Yes, because of what is coming. But we must also be aware that the reality, the future is already here, and AI is actually going to change the world of work and how we see HR in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Uncle K, I guess. Was that you?
Yes,
Right.
yes, it's me.
Good. Yeah, thank you. So that's it from me. Thank you all for your time. I really appreciate the engagement, and I hope that for everyone that's joined, we found it very useful. Over to you, Mr. Adeosun.
Okay. I think Dr. Adeosun is a little bit busy right now, but
Right. Okay. So thank you everyone for joining. Trust you've again found it useful. Enjoy the rest of your evening and the rest of your week.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so
Let's
much.
unmute our facilitator. Thank you so much. I enjoyed this.
Damola was.
Thank you. Good night.